I hope you feel like you got your money's worth yesterday. We covered a lot of information. When I went back to the room, I got, man, we went through a lot of stuff. You know, that's hard to absorb that much stuff. I know that. It's very difficult to absorb that much information at one time. We covered about a day's and a half's worth yesterday, worth of information. It just flowed really well. I appreciate that. Your questions help keep me on track, and you guys did a very good job with that. This is a little thing I wanted to go over with you, and it has to do with the marriages we talked about yesterday, with the blueprint of a marriage. And this was derived from a conversation, an enlightening conversation with the Marriage License Bureau of Arizona. Okay? About 20 years ago, my former wife filed for divorce. We had 7 children, 5 daughters and 2 sons. Our youngest at the time, our second son, was 5 years old. At the time I prepared a counterclaim to the petition for dissolution her attorney filed in domestic relations court. I met one afternoon with the head of the Maricopa County Superior Court Marriage License Bureau in downtown Phoenix. The Marriage License Bureau was headed by a young woman of about the age of 25. I asked her to explain to me the general and statutory implications of the marriage license. She was very cooperative and called in an assistant, a tall black man who at the time was working on an operations manual for internal departmental use. She deferred for most technical explanations to her assistant. He walked through the technicalities of the marriage license as it operates in Arizona. He mentioned that marriage licensing is pretty much the same in the other states, but there are a few slight differences here and there. One significant difference he mentioned was that Arizona was one of 8 western states that are community property states. The other states are common law states, including Utah, with the exception of Louisiana, which is a Napoleonic Code state. Yeah, they're under the Napoleonic Code. Louisiana, when I go down there and work on cases, it's a whole different thing.
I mean, I knew they were kind of their own country, but...
Pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah. He then explained some of the technicalities of the marriage license. He said, first of all, the marriage license is a secular contract between the parties and the state. The state is the principal party in the contract. The husband and wife are secondary or inferior parties. The secular contract is a 3-way contract between the state as principal and the husband and wife as the other 2 legs of the contract, just like the blueprint yesterday. He said in the traditional sense, a marriage is a covenant between the husband and wife and God. But in a secular contract with the state, reference to God is a dotted line and not officially considered included in the secular contract at all. Exactly like the blueprint of a marriage on the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Okay? He said, if the husband and wife wish to include God as a party in their marriage, that is a dotted line, they will have to add in their own minds the state's marriage license is strictly secular. He said further that what he meant by the relationship to God being a dotted line meant that the state regards any mention of God as irrelevant, even meaningless. In his description of the marriage license contract, the related one other dotted line. He said in a traditional religious context, marriage was a covenant between the husband and wife, and God with husband and wife joined as one. This is accomplished with a recording in a family Bible with 3 witnesses. Where do you think I came up with this stuff, right? I don't just invent things, okay? I research, I find it, I figure it out, and then I present it. This is not the case in the secular realm of the state's marriage license contract. The state is the principal or dominant party. The husband and wife are merely contractually joined as business partners, not in any religious union. Okay? They may even be considered, he said, connected to each other just by a dotted line. The picture he was trying to paint was that of a triangle with the state at the top and a solid line extending from the apex. The state down the left. I didn't even find on the United States Patent and Trademark Office website the patent of a marriage until long after this, years after this. He was describing it to a T, and then I found it and I go, oh my gosh, here it is. It's patented. It's a patented process. Just drives me crazy. Okay. The dotted line merely showing that they consider themselves to have entered into a religious union of some sort is irrelevant to the state. Marriage license secular contract diagram. State is primary in the party. The husband and wife is secondary in the party. He further mentions that this religious overtone is recognized by the state by requiring that the marriage must be solemnized either by a state official or by a minister of religion that has been deputized by the state. That's why the preacher has to get licensed by the state to perform a marriage. He's deputized by the state, which makes him an agent, right? Well, go ask your bishop if you can get married in the temple without a state license. Tell me what he says.
No, the answer is no.
I know that. Okay, that's because they've commercialized. Goes back to the attorney running the church. Okay? So the minister of religion that has been deputized by the state to perform the marriage ceremony and make a return of the signed and executed marriage license back to the state. So it's his responsibility to return it signed by him as agent. Again, he emphasized that marriage is a strictly secular relationship so far as the state is concerned, and because it is looked upon as a privileged business enterprise. So you just go into business with your wife when you marry her with the state, right? Yeah. Various tax advantages and other political privileges have become attached to the marriage license contract that have nothing at all to do with the marriage as a religious covenant or a bond between God and a man or a woman. By way of reference, if you would like to read a legal treatise on marriage, one of the best is a book called Principles of Community Property by William D. Funiak. At the outset, he explains that community property law descends from the Roman civil law through the Spanish codes dating as far back as 600 AD, written by the Spanish jurisconsulates. In the civil law, the marriage is considered to be a for-profit venture or a profit-making venture, even though it may never actually produce a profit in operation. And as the wife goes out to the local market to purchase foodstuffs and other supplies for the marriage household, she is replenishing the stocks of the business and or its inventory. To restate, in the civil law, the marriage is considered to be a business venture. Moreover, as children come into the marriage household, the business venture is considered to have borne fruit. Now back to the explanation by the Maricopa County Superior Court Marriage Bureau's administrative assistants. He went on to explain that every contract must have consideration. The state offers consideration in the form of the actual license itself, the piece of paper, the certificate of marriage. The other part of the consideration by the state is the privilege to be regulated by your statutes,
That's such a privilege.
Regulated by your statute,
by their statutes. Yeah,
just through being married.
isn't that a privilege? Once you change your status, you can rescind your contracts. I actually have a document that I used for myself to annul the state of Nevada, because that's where I got married. So I took the state out of the contract. He added that this privilege to be regulated by statute includes all related statutes and all court cases as they are ruled on by the courts, and all statutes and regulations into the future in the years following the commencement of the marriage. He said, in a way, the marriage license contract is dynamic or flexible. What did we talk about the word dynamic means yesterday in the law? To keep moving, just keep moving. So it's flexible, it keeps moving. Ever-changing contract as time goes along, even though the husband and wife doesn't realize that. My thought on this is that it can really be considered a true contract as one becomes aware of the failure by the state to make full disclosure of the terms and conditions. But remember, in court, presumption and assumptions, so must be repudiated in all aspects or you give over jurisdiction. A contract must be entered into knowingly, intelligently, intentionally, and with full informed consent. Otherwise, technically, there is no contract. But you go try telling the court that when you're a citizen, right? They could care less. The marriage license contract with the state is a contract of adhesion, a contract between two disparate, unequal parties. Again, a flawed contract. Such a contract with the state is said to be a specific performance contract as to the privileges, duties, and responsibilities that are attached. Consideration on the part of the husband and wife is the fee paid for the application and the implied agreement to be subject to the state statutes, rules, and regulations in all court cases ruled on regulated to marriage law, family law, children, and property. So the minute you fill out the application and pay the fee, you just bound yourself to the state statutes, rules, regulations, all court cases relating to marriage law, family law, children, and property.
Which essentially took all your rights away.
Yeah. Yeah, they took away your unalienable rights and gave you privileges and bound you to their contract just by going down and paying the fee and filling out the application and getting married. When you could have took the family Bible, you could buy at Deseret Industries for $40, recorded on the first few pages, take a scanned copy of it, write a little affidavit, and go record it on the county recorder's office, and you're just as legally married. But now, not with the state, but with you, your wife, and God. That's the proper way to get married. That's the way we got married for hundreds of years before this whole system of fraud came into effect.
You're stuck.
Now, you know, you really need to annul the state for the fraud that they committed, for the cause of fraud and swindle, no full and honest disclosure, right? And then get married the right way in the Bible, go record it.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go back in like Family Search or Ancestry.com or one of the other genealogy programs, and you go back and you search records like 1600s, 1700s, you'll see everybody recorded it with the church in the family, in the Bibles of the church records, and then it was recorded. And you can pull up those recordings even today from 1620.
So how would you do like the ceremony or whatever? Do you have somebody marry you, or can you just exchange vows, or like how does it work?
You can do it however you want to do it. It's between you and your husband and God. Make the decision. Get on your knees and pray about it. There's no set way.
Just people fall into a pattern.
You record the event. in the Bible. You get some witnesses who attended, who were there. They could be family members, and then just go record it. But do it in a little one-page affidavit, just agreeing on the event in the affidavit, go get it notarized, attach it to the photo scan picture of the Bible where you recorded it. The Bible is the law. It's Public Law 97-280, passed by Congress, that the Bible, the Word of God, this country was founded on Christian principles, and it is law. Congress declared the Bible, passed in 1982. Took them that long. In fact, 1983 was declared the year of the Bible. Okay? Had a presidential declaration that 1983 was the year of the Bible. So,
And then the temple marriage stands. There's nothing you have to do with that, correct? Because you're rescinding.
take that up with your bishop. Because these guys are run by attorneys now. They have been corrupted. Joseph Smith even said they were going to be. They are. And they're run by attorneys. Attorneys control this world, and we have to stop that. This is who we're at war with, is the Bar Association. Okay? I don't know. I don't think Council of the 12 is voted on by the people of the church. There's no vote there by the people. If there was, you could say, wait a minute, what does he do for a living? He's a bar member? We ain't voting him in. But you have no say in it. Look, children are yours. They're your gift from God. They're your responsibility. I don't care if you don't change your status. God gives you the ultimate right. Okay, remember I said God's laws are superior. Constitutions and treaties are supreme. Everything else is corporate bylaws, or as I like to call it, SMU. Yeah. Even our prophet in DNC 98 said, it cometh of evil. I mean, are you righteous or not? Go obey all those statutes they tell you to, and then tell me if you're righteous about it. No. You're taking away someone by your obeyance. You're taking away your own and everyone else's freedom. You get that? You're actually contributing as a society to deprive people of their rights and their freedom when you obey the statutes. Now, am I telling you to go out there and break the law and get tickets and write on them, your offer to contract's not accepted? Yes, a little bit, I am. But you got to know how to do it, see? Otherwise, I don't want you in jail. I don't want cops kicking the crap out of you like they do most people and knocking them down on the pavement. Kneel on their neck. Okay?
Or shoot them.
What I'm telling you is be nice about it, educate everybody, and then let's just start saying, wait a minute, legislature, this statute does not fall in line with the Constitution, therefore it is null and void, and we, the people, will ignore it with impunity. Okay, in this regard, children born to the contract regarded as the contract-bearing fruit, he said it is virtually important for parents to understand two doctrines that became established in the United States during the 1930s. The first of these doctrines is parens patriae. The second doctrine is in loco parentis. You know what in loco parentis means? Crazy parenting. Crazy parenting. That's what it means. And that's a doctrine in our law, where the state is the parent and it's crazy parenting. Parens patriae means literally the parent of the country, or to state it more bluntly, the state is the undisclosed true parent of the child.
Isn't that a basis of communism?
What's that?
Yes.
The foundation of communism?
Well, of course it is.
Communism, fascism.
Yeah, start with Abe Lincoln. He was a follower of Karl Marx. Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848. Okay, start looking at Lincoln's first 5 runs as president when he tried to be president. He failed 5 times before he finally became president on his 6th, and it might be, I don't remember, I thought it was 5 and then 6th time he became president. But it wasn't until the big bankers of Boston, New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia got behind him, and they put $7 million into his campaign. $7 million in 1850. Oh, yeah, our presidential campaigns now are in the billions of dollars. Okay? $7 million in 1850 was a lot of money. Do you know how much his opponent had? 5,000. You've listened to my dang videos. $5,000. So Lincoln's name was hanging on signs from every railroad car, every bridge, across roadways. He just plastered the nation at that time, which wasn't nearly as big as it is now, but he plastered his name on everything, and people finally voted for him. But if you go back to his early runs as presidency, and you look at letters and journals of people who lived during the time, they talk about him helping to pass communistic laws in the state of Illinois, which is where he was from. And they didn't want the communist son of a buck as president. And it said that in a lot of letters that people wrote. They did not want him as president of the United States. But what are we taught in our history books? Honest Abe, cannot tell a lie. Little kids getting up on stage in primary school 77 years ago. They do the whole Abe thing. It's all about freedom of slavery. I got a letter that President Lincoln wrote in my PowerPoint presentation that says he would never have freed the slaves had it been up to him.
In point, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves any place they were slaves.
Right. Right. Had he not been shot, he might have accomplished more things, which then we would now be able to blame him for it, you know. But it took presidents after him, lots of them, all the way between him in 1861 through 63 and 1933. It took a whole bunch of things happening, little acts of Congress, little things happening, laws being passed, that created this whole system of fraud. And it all happened in that period of time. Now we added to it in 1945 in December, and we added to it in 1947 again, and we added to it in 1975 again, and so on and so forth. We made it worse. But during that period of time, that's where most of this crap happened. Think about your grandfathers living during that period of time. They'd write something in the newspaper in New York City, and 2 months later read it in San Francisco. By then it had already taken place. How do they object to something that was printed in the newspaper and then already done within 30 days, when it's 30 days later by the time they even know about it? And we were spreading west. We were spreading thin all over this country. And so our grandfathers didn't have what I call much ability to rebut, if any. And so what did they do? Power breeds power and corruption. And so they just added to things and gained power at an incredibly fast rate. And now, since then, we had World War II, we've had Korea, Grenada, Panama, Iraq, war after war after war after war after war, Vietnam, all of them. All these wars, besides World War II, United Nations authorized conflicts. Who the heck's got the time to rebut all this stuff? Well, now it's time. This is what I'm trying to do is wake up a nation, and you guys all go, let's handle it together, right? I really want to check with the State Department again and see how many of us there are, but I did get a little notice last month that said the numbers in the last couple of months, the last quarter, was huge. The amount of people that are rejecting their citizenship is huge.
And is the basis of the U.S. jumping from the UN and being sovereign, is that based on the percentage of U.S. nationals?
Well, it certainly helps because we're declaring that we have rights, that we control government. The more we show President, he gets those reports. Mike Pompeo at the State Department meets with the president. He gives him those reports and says, hey, look, last quarter, 40,000 people jumped ship. Maybe we ought to do something about this. President Trump's going, yes, he is. See, he knows.
So, just a question, do you know if all the states, I can't imagine somebody saying, hey, let's organize our state and make it so that we own everybody, all the children, that we own them, that they're the ward of the state. Is there any state that just kind of rebelled against that? Or?
Well, let me talk about a couple of states. Alabama, through the 10th Amendment Society, because of me talking in front of the 10th Amendment Society and talking about this right here, they took it to their legislature and ran with it. I didn't have any part of that other than giving the initial, fuel to the fire. And they took it and ran with it. Now Alabama doesn't issue state marriage licenses. They say record it in a Bible, bring it to the probate judge at the courthouse. He'll take care of it. He'll get it recorded on the land. He'll sign off on it. So you just submit it. He signs off of it. It gets recorded with the county.
That's all you need is a signature, or do you need the seal as well, or something?
Well, I don't know. They went through their own legislature and passed the law with the process of how they're wanting to do it. And it doesn't involve the state marriage license. Okay? Oklahoma. Look at what the Indians just did in Oklahoma. Did you hear about that?
No.
Oh, yeah, they just took back a whole ton of land.
Yeah.
More than half the state of Oklahoma is an Indian reservation now. More than half. And on the other half that isn't, no police officer has any authority over a Native American. See, the problem was these Indians were going off the reservation, going into town and getting drunk, causing problems, and the sheriffs were beating the out of them and keeping them in jail with no due process of law. I got one Indian friend who has been fighting the state of Oklahoma for a long, long time, 3-4 years, legally, and he keeps winning. He just keeps winning. He goes into town, he gets beat up, sues them, and he wins. And he's been doing that over and over again. Now they can't even touch him. They have to refer him to the tribal police, right? So, no, man, those sheriffs down there were treating those guys like crap. Not only that, what's even worse is the Child Protective Services stealing the Indian children. So, did you ever watch the movie Wind River? I suggest you watch it, look at the end credits and what it says at the very end of that movie. Because they've had no system to determine how many Indian children and young women and even young men who have gone missing. Okay, parents patria literally means the parent of the country. This means the parents may raise their children and maintain custody of their children as long as they don't offend the state. But if they in some manner displease the state can step in at any time and exercise its superior status and take custody and control of its children. The parents are only conditional caretakers. Thus the doctrine of in loco parentis. How does that make you feel? Yeah, the mother's the tug. Tugs a baby out to sea and it's presumed dead and lost after its soul plate has been taken. Until it comes back and claims its minor estate, or until you stand up and fight. Okay, he also added a few more technical details. The marriage license is an ongoing contractual relationship with the state. Technically, the marriage license is a business license allowing the husband and wife, in the name of the marriage, to enter into contracts with third parties and contract for mortgages and debts. They can get car loans, home mortgages, and installment debts in the name of the marriage because it is not only a secular enterprise, but is looked upon by the state as a privileged business enterprise as well as a for-profit business enterprise. The marriage contract acquires property throughout its existence, and over time, it is hoped that it increases in value. This goes to legal term limited conditional title or lease, the right to make a profit or to incur a loss. I say that in all my videos. To make a profit or incur a loss. That's what you have the right to do in your marriage. Now, a lot of times you just go on dates, you like her, you should just write a check and buy her a house. Because that happens. All right, it's a business. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. Not really. So at the end of this 1 hour long meeting, I somewhat humorously asked if other people had come in and asked the question I was asking. Has anybody else came in and asked the questions that I was asking? The assistant replied that in the many years that he had worked there, he was not aware of anyone else asking these questions. He added that he was very glad to see someone interested in the legal implications of the marriage license and the contractual relationship it creates with the state. That's the problem. We're just kind of grow up, going along, believing and taught to comply, to not stand up and question anyone. We're just told, hey, this is how you do it. Go apply for a marriage license. Go right down here. You know, get married in a church or justice of the peace or whatever, but you got to get that state marriage license to do it. Get married in the temple, but you got to get that state license to do it. And so we just run down to get that state license. We pay the fee and we go about our lives thinking we're free. But what did we just legally do to ourselves? We shackled ourselves.
Can we get a copy, Sam?
Sure. His boss, the young woman Marriage Bureau Department head, stated, if you have to understand that people who come in here to get a marriage license are in heat. The last thing they want to know is technical, legal, and statutory implications of the marriage license. I hope this is helpful information to anyone interested in getting more familiar with the contractual implications of the marriage license. The marriage license, as we know it, didn't come into existence until after the Civil War, and it didn't become standard practice in all the states until after 1900, becoming firmly established by 1920. In effect, the states or governments appropriated or usurped the control of marriages in secular form, and in the process declared common law application to marriages abrogated. Look, if you write down the event, the time, the date, the place, who the parties are, and I would call them a mate and a helpmate, as it does in the Bible. Australians at least got that part right. That took you guys just a little long. Must be Sunday morning. Yeah, write them down as a mate and a helpmate, not a husband and wife. A mate and a helpmate. That's what we really are to each other. Record the event. Get the names down. Get it recorded. Who officiated it? And a couple of witnesses that showed up at your marriage, at your wedding. Put that down in the Bible. Take a photograph of it so it's scanned in nice. Print it off. Do a one-page affidavit and go record it. And it's every bit as legal. Didn't cost you much more, or probably less. A good family Bible is about $40 at DI, right? And those are the ones with the extra pages in the front and the back, so you can record your children's births, probates, deaths, everybody in your family. You can record it there. Any Christian Bible. See, this is the thing. Congress declared the 1611 King James Version of the Bible as the Word of God. That doesn't mean any subsequent printings aren't as well. However, if you look at a lot of these new Bibles, man has corrupted them so badly it's not even funny. I always go back to the 1611 version. I've got it on my iPad. I've got it on my phone. Download the app. In fact, you can download the app with all the Maccabees and the additional books that we took out of the basement of the Vatican. About 1994. We took those out of the basement of the Vatican.
I have a question about adoption. So we originally got married, not really for getting married, but because he was going to adopt my older son, and we still haven't gone through that process. But is there a way? Because we wanted.
The only reason in our process today that you adopt through the state is so that you can declare the fruit. See, it's like if I take apples from Oregon and I drive into California with a box of apples in my back seat, they stop me at the border and ask if I got any fruit to declare. That's all you're doing is declaring your fruit without adoption with the state.
So they can now attach you.
In reality, see, you're talking about your child and him adopting him, okay? You write a contract with each other. Put it in the Bible. Record the event. Go record it.
What about,
Do an affidavit claiming, I am the father, okay?
does my son's biological father have to,
And then tell the state, yeah,
I guess he would have to repeat
I'm serious. Who are they anyway? A corporation located in Washington, D.C.?
Mr. Straight, when a child is in public school, does that mean that they're in public schools jurisdiction? And what I mean is that when we were working with Rachel's Tears, we kept hearing repeated reports of children being taken off of school premises, always Friday afternoon, parents rushing to the courthouse, finding it closed, having to wait till Monday morning. 72 hours was gone, they opened the case.
When they took my 6 kids in 1989, DHS took my kids. No, they took them out of a hospital. Out of a hospital. My 2-year-old son had got in a garage with the babysitter while I was at work, and he had spilt some gasoline on himself. So I had a lawnmower out there, lawn equipment, chainsaws, little gas cans, and he had spilt some gas on himself. That door, by the way, was between my kitchen and my garage with a couple steps down. That house that I lived in at that time, the laundry room was literally in the garage, off to one side. So she had gone in there to do some laundry and left the door open. I knew she had to go in there and do laundry. I installed a deadbolt on that door. The door had a glass window in it, and I put a sign on the window that says, keep this door locked at all times. So I did my part, and I went to work. Had to work for a living. Come home, Friday night, little sign says, your son Christopher got in the garage, he spilled some gas on himself, I'm not sure if he drank any, so we rushed him to the hospital. So I drive 100 miles an hour across town to the hospital. I get over there, I walk in, I start inquiring about my kids, and I'm noticing that the gal I'm talking to is kind of looking over my shoulder every once in a while. So I turn around and there's 2 police officers standing behind me. So I walk over and said, hey, I need your help. I'm trying to find my kids. She doesn't give me any information. I want to know where my kids are at. And as I'm talking to them, I look over their shoulder out the front windows of the hospital, and I see I'm watching my kids being loaded in a white van. So I pushed them out of the way, and I went chasing the van through the parking lot. Of course, I couldn't catch them. But that's exactly what happened. They can take them from anywhere because the state, claims to be the parent. So I have a 1-page document that I tell people to tape 4 or 5 copies on the backside of their door at their house. And if a cop shows up or a CPS agent shows up, they can tear one off, hand it to them through the door, lock the door deadbolt behind them, let them read it, and then they'll leave. Okay? But we should also have them in our car. We should take them to the school for day one, hand one to the school nurse, hand one to the superintendent, hand one to the principal, hand one to every one of their teachers, and put those people on notice. No one talks to your children, ever. They don't talk to your children unless it's to educate them. But for no governmental reason, no authority reason, are they to even talk to your children. The only thing they're supposed to be there to do is teach them English and math, in my opinion. Not very well. They shouldn't even be there. Yeah. Well, they shouldn't even be there, okay? It's our responsibility, and they've been lax in it, and they're not doing a good job. So that brings up a great point. I'm going to talk for just a minute. 1951. They paraded, if you could picture in your mind a school teacher, the perfect school teacher, a little old lady school teacher, if you could close your eyes and say, this is the sweetest lady who knows everything, who could teach my kids, that picture in your mind would be Jane Spalding. Jane Spalding. The United States government paraded her around to all 50 states between 1951 and 1953, educating the states and selling them on standardized education. So that a student going to school in Los Angeles, if their parents moved to New York in the middle of the school year, they could move over there and fit right in, right, same curriculum, same testing, same everything. But it was also on the auspice that the schools would get federal money, right? Before that, it was state-run schools. So the idea was that when all the states signed on to this, Jane Spalding would be the head of the Department of Education for the United States government. And as this perfect school teacher, she would make sure your children were getting the best education possible. And she truly was perfect. On April 11th, 1953, the 50th state signed on to the program. And Jane Spalding became the head of the Department of Education. 49 days later, the President of the United States at that time fired her and put Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller in as the head of the Department of Education. At his acceptance speech, which was a very famous speech, there were a room full of reporters, cameramen, and they asked him some questions. One was, Nelson, how much money did you make last year? He said $140 million, 1953. He was a grandson of one of the most prominent banking families in the world. He made $140 million. They said, how much did you pay in taxes? And he reached in his pocket and he grabbed out a penny, which at that time they were Indian head pennies, and he flicked it into the audience and he says, not one red cent. Now today he would have been hammered for that being a racist statement, right? Not one red cent. And that line became famous. And they said, Nelson, if you made $140 million last year, why would you take this position? It only paid at that time, I think it was $37,000 or something, a yearly salary as the head of the Department of Education. $37,000 was a lot of money in that time. Okay, the average house was about $2,500 bucks. Okay, and he said, because I consider it the most important position in all of government. Hands went up, flashbulbs went off. They said, you mean you consider it a greater position than the President and the Vice President of the United States? And he looks at him and says, absolutely I do. Because if you give me one decade, one generation, and I'll change the minds and therefore the direction of the world. I'll change the minds and therefore the direction of the world. And he did. 8 years later, not even a decade, 8 years later, every textbook in our schools were changed to lies. Now that wasn't the first revision. Go back to 1908 when the Jekyll Island and the Federal Reserve started to come into play and things started changing back then. They changed at that time as well. Our textbooks changed on a state level, state by state, they all changed. I had an argument with a 20-year professor of history that went on about 3 months. I mean, we were going back and forth on the phone, on emails, on text messages. He had watched one of my videos. Now, it wasn't just about him. It was more about Abe Lincoln. But he had watched one of my videos where I just hammered old Abe. And he called me up and he said, David, I think you're not telling the truth here. I think you're telling lies. And I said, oh, really? Explain that to me. And I challenged him. And there's not many people that can out-debate me. Okay? And he started talking about things. And I said, well, where did you get your information? He says, well, out of the textbooks. I've been teaching for 25 years. Well, I said, great. Do you have any textbooks that are, say, prior to the turn of the century, 1900 and before? And he said, no. I said, go see if you can find any. A couple weeks went by, sent him a little text. Hey, did you find any of those textbooks yet? No, I can't find any anywhere. I said, keep looking. A couple weeks go by. Hey, have you found any of those textbooks yet? Nope. This went on for 3 months. Finally, he says, I had to go back, and I forgot where it was, Connecticut or somewhere back in the Northeast, to a family reunion. And I was walking down the street, and there was a garage sale, and there was a box of books there, and it was a whole bunch of really old books. And I found 2 history textbooks, one from before 1900 and one from like 1902, 1903, somewhere in there. And I said, well, what did you learn? He says, I learned that everything I've been teaching for 25 years is a lie. Yeah. He was devastated. This man, I mean, he needed counseling by the time he was done. Just devastated. I mean, he was ready to retire after just finding those 2 textbooks. And anyway, the only way to learn true history is to get it from the horse's mouth. Read letters and journals of people who lived during the time, and what did they think? What did they write to their grandmother and their neighbor, and had the conversations they carried on about old Abe Lincoln? Read some of the letters that were written in Illinois in the 1850s, and you'll get a whole new picture of the man. Okay, and it's not just him. I'm just using him as an example. History is rewritten by the victor. And when Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller became the victor, he rewrote history. And guess who that affected? Me. I wasn't born until 63. He had already had this decade in place between 53 and 63 to change everything. So when I went into school, everything I learned kindergarten through 12th grade was a lie, pretty much. Yeah. Fortunately, I had a mother that got me interested in things like history and genealogy, and she really taught me how to read and how to study and how to learn. But reading is not reading. She also taught me it's comprehending, it's searching, that they're only going to put something in one little place over here, and then the next piece of the puzzle is going to be over here, and the next piece of the puzzle is going to be over here, and you got to find those puzzle pieces. What is the key in this one set of laws? What's that one key that shows you a piece of the puzzle? What is that one key over in this piece of law that shows you the puzzle? Or in this book that shows you the puzzle? I suggest reading The Law of Nations by Vattel. That's how our country was founded. Read the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers. That's the arguments that they had at the conventions before the Declaration of Independence was written. Do you guys know what the Declaration of Independence says? It's probably the most important document we have. There's also the Magna Carta from 1215. That was one of the most important documents, because everything that happens in England a few hundred years before it happens here. But that's one of the most important documents that helps us to be free. Okay? Then read Judge Napolitano. He says the constitutions usurp the Articles of Confederation. Somebody asked me this at lunch, and I said I'd talk about it tomorrow, so I'm going to bring it up. With Lincoln, what happened? What happened with Lincoln? First of all, when he finally did, because of the bankers' money, win the presidency, he couldn't be president. Did you know that? He was a bar member. We had other attorneys that were presidents prior to that, but he was the first bar association president. He couldn't be, because he held a title of nobility, he couldn't be president. See, the 13th Tona Amendment was put in the first Constitution, which, by the way, one of my grandfathers, Richard Straight, signed that first Constitution. And it had that 13th Tona Amendment, saying that it's called, I call it Tona because it's Titles of Nobility Act. No one holding a title of nobility, no prince, king, queen, esquire, which is a bar member, could hold the office of the president. So what did he do when he became president? He bankrupted the original United States of America, and he incorporated it as a Delaware corporation. And then he put the Grand Army of the Republic in charge of the country. And then he made himself the commander-in-chief. He signed Executive Order Number 1. He was the first president in history to sign an executive order. Within 30 days, he signed Executive Order Number 100. 100 executive orders in his first 30 days in office. Executive Order 100 was the Lieber Code. It put the country under martial rule, and it's never been rescinded. This is why we've been flying the war flag ever since. We've been under war. And by the way, women, the Lieber Code says they're not supposed to attack women or children. So if you use the Lieber Code in court as a woman, things ought to go a lot easier on you. If you can find a judge that cares about that anymore. So, Lincoln did a lot of things that started us on this path of corruption. So who was a hero? Was it Booth? Was he the patriot?
No, all that.
I mean, you got to understand who played the right part. History was written by the victor. So they just twisted the story. They flipped it on its head. Do I like talking bad about any of our presidents? No, I don't. How many presidents did we have prior to George Washington? If you know, don't answer. Because I knew you were going to throw that. You're close. We had 14 presidents prior to George Washington. This country was founded in 1607 in Jamestown, Virginia, 1620 in Massachusetts. It wasn't until 1776 that the Declaration of Independence was written. The United States of America started in 1776. What were we prior to 1776? Well, between 1607 and 1620, in the South, we were under the Virginia Delegate, the Virginia Compact. What were we in Massachusetts? We were under the Mayflower Compact starting in 1620. They arrived in Mayflower in the Boston Harbor in November in Boston. You know how cold it is in November in Boston? And they arrived. And they said, we're not leaving the ship and going ashore. They'd been in sea for 3 months or more, and they want to get on the land really bad, right? But they refused to go to shore until the Mayflower Compact was written and signed. 6 of my grandfathers signed the Mayflower Compact. When they went ashore that first winter, with no homes built, not knowing where they're going to get food other than game they could get out of the forest, couldn't grow any fruits or vegetables, and sure as hell didn't bring enough with them. Half of the 116 people on the Mayflower died first winter. Half. That is an incredible thing. One of my grandfathers had a son at sea. They named him Oceanic. Oceanic was his first name. Oceanic Hopkins. There's several books written about his father. His father first came to this country. He would have been the first ship to land in Virginia before Captain Smith. But they hit a tropical storm off the southern eastern coast. They capsized and swam to Bermuda. 14 of them made it out of 140. 14 made it. With no tools, just the clothes on their back and no food. They built 2 rowboats and rowed the 99 miles from Bermuda to the coast of Florida, and then up the coast, knowing there was other ships coming to Jamestown, Virginia. And when they got to Jamestown, Captain Smith had just arrived. Their ship had been damaged. So he indentured himself as a servant, slave, to Captain Smith for 2 years in order to pay for supplies and food and to help the 14 people that came with him. 2 of those died along the way and 12 made it. Okay? He was still indentured to Captain Smith when Captain Smith had to sail back to England. So he didn't get to remain on the shores that he loved. He went back to England. During the time that Captain Smith was in England is when his indentureness ran out. And now he's stranded in England with no money, nothing. He started a business. He became a very wealthy businessman between 1609 and 1620. And he had had 3 children and got married during that time. And they all jumped, and his wife was pregnant, and they all jumped on the Mayflower. And she had a baby at sea named Oceanic. And he was the only one that arrived on the Mayflower with previous Indian experience and American experience. Okay? And they wrote a book about him that when he got off the Mayflower, he knelt down on the sand and he says, "On these shores I shall live or die forever." That he was never, ever going back to England. So, that's fortitude, okay? The fact of the matter is we've gone to all these years in school and we just haven't been taught the truth. Not only have we haven't been taught the truth, we haven't had one single law class, and every day since we got our driver's permit, we've been dealing with the law. And that's what I want to change. We all have to learn enough to stand. And if we can do that, go out there and gather people and start teaching them. We all need to put on our own little classes. We need to teach our own family and our family's family and our friends and our grandkids how to stand up. Because it won't be long before I guarantee they might take one of your grandchildren. The odds are 1 in 5. 1 in 5.
My child is not a commodity.
Okay? Yeah, knowing what I know today, I would have held on to them like this and threatened them at all cost. Okay? No way would they use a false and fraudulent doctrine to take a child from me. I don't care how many guns came, I'd stand there and die and to take as many of them out as I could just to prove them wrong. And then hope somebody wrote about it to prove them wrong. You know, that's a key. We've got to make a stand if our life depends on it, because it does. Let's write about it first so we don't have to die, okay? That's the key. Stand up. Stand up in court. Stand up now. Get that warning. Ask me for the warning. I should have printed one off. Didn't even think about it.
How did you get your kids back? Well, 2 things. Did you see that they are scheduled a DCS appointment for Millie's kids tomorrow?
Absolutely. I said that the other day. I commented on that the moment I found out yesterday morning. I commented that the next thing that's going to happen is they're coming for her kids. Yeah. Yeah, I did.
Well, they're already going after our elders.
Okay, that is a real sore subject with me too, because I get tons of phone calls every day from people whose parents are being abused in these homes. Isolated, abused, not being allowed to visit, drugged, even killed and murdered. In fact, I got a person that I've helped quite a bit over the years, and his new wife, they've only been married about a year, she has worked for 20 years in an old folks home in Indiana. And she was listening to me having a conversation about this and just cried and cried and cried on my shoulder about it. She is absolutely devastated from what she's watched in the 20 years she's been there, and didn't realize, I don't know why people don't just see it and say, hey, gosh, that's wrong, this can't happen. But she didn't realize that hospice was literally killing people in these homes. The biggest thing is opioids and morphine and
some of them have prescriptions that their loved ones don't think that they're actually getting, that somebody's stealing the prescription. Somebody's telling me that their mother has a prescription for like hydrocodone. Did they say they've been waking her up at 1 o'clock in the morning to give it to her? No, that's not happening. Somebody's stealing it.
the morphine shots are the worst. She was telling me that this older lady who she had been managing for quite a few years never complained about being in pain. Never complained about being in pain. One day the doctor recommended hospice care over and above the care that she was already providing in the home. And from the day she went into hospice, they were giving her morphine shots. And they just keep upping the dosing, upping the dose, and upping the dose. And within a week, she was dead. She'd been taking care of her 5 years. Said she'd never in 5 years complained about pain. That wasn't her issue. Her issue is she was losing her mind and never complained about her body being in pain. Then why would hospice use morphine? Morphine is what you give a soldier in the field when he is shot. That's the only real purpose of morphine, in my opinion. It is a major, major injury where you're in so much pain, and in the field you have to be quiet or the enemy finds you. So you can't have an injured guy that you have to haul 20 kilometers back to get him out of there. You can't have him screaming in pain because it'll kill your whole platoon or your whole unit. To me, that's the only reason to use morphine. And then it stops when they get back to the medical facility. She says she also notices that they're taking their property. I have a man who retired from the railroad, but not only did he retire from the railroad, his whole life he had been a collector of trains and buses. And he had over 100 acres of trains and buses, literally all restored, some of them worth 2 or 3 million for one unit. Okay, his estate was estimated at the time, this was 1996, it was estimated $170 million worth of trains and buses. They used his trains and buses in quite a few movies. Okay, he was getting paid from Hollywood some pretty big bucks just to use his stuff because he's one of the only places they could go to get that authentic equipment, right? He had 2 children. He went to a prominent law firm in Florida to have a trust set up for his kids. That attorney firm saw how much he was worth. They paid the daughter, a 17-year-old daughter of a hooker, to set him up. He wasn't even in the same city. And they faked it. They set it up. They had her testify that she did some awful things to him as a minor. These attorneys did this. They threw him in jail. I have all the records. I have her confession 5 years later that it never happened, that she never even met the man. But to strengthen their story, they, in the court case, said he had touched his own kids as well, that he was this pedophile, this pervert. Now he's in a Philadelphia prison at 80 years old. He never committed a crime. He's been there since 1996. And the attorneys stole his entire estate except for about 70 million that they didn't know about that was offshore, that he didn't tell anybody. But he's got about 70 million down in the Cayman Islands that they didn't know about. But everything here in America, they stole. He also ran the Hebrew Foundation for America to benefit Hebrew children here in America. And he gave a lot of money to Hebrew children because that was his heritage. And now he's in prison. He's 80 years old. I'd like to get him out. And this COVID thing came along. We were ready to start it all, and this COVID thing came along. They shut the court case down, and they isolated him in the prison. We can't get any documents signed. We can't tell him what he's doing. We can't get anything notarized. It's just in limbo since about last February.
It's not one of those prisons they just say, you can go.
And it's not. They've got him literally in solitary confinement, shoving him a plate here and there. Yeah, he's 80 years old now. His kids I have affidavits from his kids that he never did that. I have her affidavit. When she's now 25, she wrote the affidavit. She wrote it like 6 or 7 years later. A gal named Mary found her and got an affidavit from her that she had never did it. But these attorney firms used police officers to destroy evidence, to cover up this thing. You look at the court transcripts and they denied the evidence. It's like he couldn't defend himself. He'd put evidence into the court case. Now, we're throwing that out. Motion to suppress. He couldn't even defend himself. And they stole roughly the 170 million they knew about. Fortunately, he's got 70 million left, if he can ever get out without dying in there.
Because of COVID?
Well, right now, that's what's holding us up.
How do we beat that? Like they're just pretty much taking our family members into these prisons. We can't, see them, visit them, went into the hospital. How do we beat that? How do we fight that?
My best guess is start building gallows. Just take them down to the Capitol and set them up on the steps and just leave them there. Say, you're next. You keep messing with our rights, you're next. Just a notice, a warning. Okay? Don't threaten anybody personally. Don't name names. But we got to do something. I don't know what to do. I'm this close to arming up at 2 a.m. That's how the government trained me, the 2 o'clock hour. Okay? That's when everybody's asleep. I'm not saying we should cross that line. We shouldn't. We got to do everything we possibly can before it comes to that. If not, they're going to start shooting, and then it will be at that. Once they fire the first round, it's open season.
But that's what they want.
That's right. They want us to open the first round. We can't do that. That's what I'm trying to tell you. We can't do that. But we got 90 million veterans in this country with firearms. And they're all buying more every day. I'll be quite honest with you. I get quite a few visions all the time. Visions. God opens things up to me. And I've seen the Civil War. It's talked about in the Bible, by the way. And I've seen it. And we have 7 years of turmoil after the Great Awakening. So people are got to wake up, and pretty soon we got to stand up. Right now we're in the middle of waking up. So this is the process of waking up right here. We're all involved in it in this room.
So when did the 7 years of turmoil start, or has it yet?
It's going to start approximately March 18th of 2023. Gregorian calendar is not right. You want to talk about that for a minute? Our calendar is not quite right. We're supposed to have 13 months of 28 days. With one day, the day of resurrection, Easter, as a neutral day. That's our 365 days. We've actually got 13 constellations, not 12. This same calendar is very close to the Mayan calendar, but it's also very close to several ancient Sanskrit calendars. What does sept mean? 7. I thought that was the 9th month. What does oct mean? What does nov mean? What does dec mean? It's supposed to be the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th month. Jan is 11. Feb is 12. March is 13. April is our first month. Babies are born in the spring, the 1st of April, Easter. This is the start of our new year. This is the start of spring when the flowers start coming up, the grass starts coming up, the trees start leafing out, the babies are born. That's the first day. Our neutral day, day 1, the day we rest and celebrate the resurrection, the new beginning, the beginning of Christ. April is month 1. And then we lost a month in there. Where is it? What's it called? We know what it's called. I'm not going to reveal it yet, but we know what it's called. But this is the true calendar. The Gregorian calendar is SMU. Shit made up by man. It's to keep us out of our natural cycles. We all vibrate at one of 3 frequencies. Did you know that? Okay. 432 hertz is the God frequency. That's the celestial frequency. And we have a telestial and a terrestrial frequency. Darn right. She says that why when people are true, we can feel it and we can sense it. We know that it's right. You know, we don't even have to research it. We know, we can feel it. We feel it in our bodies and our spirits and our souls, and we know it's right.
By the way, 528 hertz is the love vibration or the DNA healing vibration. If you didn't know.
By the way, 528 and 633 and 432 are our 3 frequencies, okay? So it depends on whether you're celestial, telestial, or terrestrial. That's 60. 60. Well, what is, 5G. What is our clocks been running at? 60. All of our electricity, 60. We've been under Satan for a long time. This is a satanic frequency. It's really celestial, telestial, and terrestrial, believe it or not. Our church teaches us as 3 degrees of heaven, but it's really our 3 frequencies. Our souls are energy. The energy holds our minerals together, which is our bodies. Our bodies are nothing more than the dust of the earth, held together by energy, by our souls. So anyway, you can see just from this example that our current calendar is wrong by a long ways. Gregorian calendar is just SMU, along with statute, codes, policy. It's all stuff somebody just made up. You know, it's just like what we found on the FDA. It's made over 1,398 policy regulations which have become law under the FDA. And the gal that wrote them never had the authority to write them. She just made shit up. And they're out there putting people in jail for breaking her policies, her law. Every agency of government does that, especially Child Protective Services. Okay. Yeah. So that's a little kind of fun. You could draw that out. I wish somebody would. Just go ahead and just make up our new calendar. Did you know how it would work if every day, how many days of the week are there? 7, right? 7 goes into 28 equally. So if the 5th of the month was on a Monday, on every month, the 5th would be on a Monday, all year long. We wouldn't have to sit there and think about what day of the week is it compared to what, you know, what day of the month is it, right? It'd just become, it would be natural. We would just, we would learn it once and it would just come to us. See?
Well, the divide and conquer goes deep.
That's right. Satan divides and conquers.
It's not just divide by confusion currently. It's been divided and conquered all the way down to our energy level.
Right. And they're doing that.
Yes.
That's what they're doing. They're trying to bring us down from these beautiful high vibrational frequencies and drop us down to 60 hertz.
Is that what part of the vaccine RNA DNA modification is about, changing our DNA structure to alter the frequency so we can't think straight?
Let me tell you something. Do you know all these movies about zombies? I used to go, oh, that's just shit, right? And then my son, who's autistic, designed one of his games as a zombie shoot game, right? I got a son that's autistic, and he's in his 20s, and he designs games. He sells them on the App Store through Apple, and he gets a check for $4,000 or $5,000 a month. It's totally self-sufficient. He has almost no vocabulary at all. In his late 20s, he sees me, he runs up, Dad, 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 like he's 18 months old. His vocabulary's gone. And I can tell you a long story about that, too. Absolutely.
Also, you got to get that sometime too.
Yeah, a good mentor. That's why I decided I would be a good mentor. because without him, I don't know what would have happened. I fought for my kids. I got them back right away. 3 days. 3 days, I had them back by 5 o'clock. You know what I did? He told me exactly what to do, so I guess I'll tell this little short story. All right. First of all, after they took him from the hospital and the cops stopped me, the next morning, which that night was a very bad night, I almost committed suicide that night. I had just gone through a divorce 6 months earlier. I was a single dad, raising 6 kids under the age of 8. And I just started a new business 25 miles up the freeway. So I had 2 babysitters coming over every day. Babysitters recommended to me by the state on their list of approved babysitters. And I'd leave for work. They'd show up a little before 7 every morning. I'd leave for work at 7. I'd get home at 6, and they'd go home. Until that one Friday night. And what I found out later is they'd been covering for each other. So they'd both show up, then one would leave and go do their thing after I left, and come back, so they were both there when I came home. And then the next day, they'd swap. So not only were I paying 2 and getting 1, but yeah. So anyway, that next morning, I went to the police station, the sheriff's department actually, and I told them I wanted to file a kidnapping, that my kids had been kidnapped. It was a plain white van, didn't really lie to the sheriff. I knew DHS had took them. I mean, but he said he can't do that for 48 hours. He said, just wait till Monday morning, go check with DHS. I ain't waiting till Monday morning. I'm going down there on a Saturday.
They could be dead by then if they were truly kidnapped.
Correct. But that's how they are. They got to be missing like 24 hours. Anyway, I go down to the DHS and I start knocking on the door. And pretty soon I see somebody way down the hallway and I start knocking on the door until my knuckles are bloody. Finally, they came to the door and they weren't much help, which I knew they wouldn't be. But what they said is, I said, I'm here looking for my kids, the straight children. Where are they? She goes, I don't know anything about that. Great. That's all I wanted to hear. Now I went back to the sheriff and I said, hey, I went to DHS, got a hold of somebody. They don't have my kids. Little fib. They don't have my kids. And he says, all right, I'll take the report. And he took the report. His attitude sucked. I didn't think he was going to do anything. But when he came back out with the paperwork, he also brought this little white business card, and it had this guy's name on it with a phone number, and it said retired. And that was it. That's all that was on that card. He said, here, call this guy. He helps people just like you. Anyway, he took my report. I knew he wasn't going to do anything. So I called him. His name's Roger. I'm still friends with him today, but now he's getting to the age where he's starting to lose his mind too, which is sad, because in 1989 he was a genius. But he was also a retired federal prosecutor for 23 years. And he mentored me. He literally stayed with me at my house all day Saturday and all day Sunday. And he told me exactly what to do. He says, I want you to show up at the county courthouse, take a stack of papers with you. He says, I don't care what they are. It doesn't matter what they are. Just take a stack of papers with you and show up at the courthouse. Show up early. So I sat outside on the steps waiting for them to open the door, and I walked in. And he says, this particular courthouse has 4 courtrooms, right? And they're offset. There's like one here, one here, one here, and one here. He says, right in front of the door of each courtroom is a bench. Sit on one of them, put your head down, just look at your paperwork and act like you belong there so people won't question you. Okay? Okay, Roger, I'll do it. I'll do anything. I got guts if nothing else. Right? So I did that, and he says, wait for a court to be in session. Each door of this courtroom has a little tiny glass window. He says, look through the window, and when you see the judge sit down, you get up. You walk across the hall, you throw the doors open, and you walk in like you own the place. Walk right up to the judge's stand and say, I need your help. This is an emergency. Just like that. This is an emergency. All right? I need you to do me a favor, Judge. I need you to sign a piece of paper and take your lunch hour for me. Can you do that? I promise I won't take much of your time. He goes, what do you need me to sign? I said, just sign something that I can give to the sheriff to have him go get the guy that I need to be here to speak with you with. He's not going to come on his own. And I've already talked to the sheriff. And so the judge said, what's the guy's name? And by then, that morning, I'd had the DHS worker's name. So he writes his name down. He says, take this down to the court clerk. She'll type it up all formal-like. He just wrote down on a piece of paper. Took it down to the hallway to the clerk. She wrote it up. I ran to the sheriff. I gave him the piece of paper. He went and picked up the guy from DHS, and they both met me back at noon. In fact, we got there like 2 minutes late, and I was sweating bullets because he said, be here right at noon. We walk in, and the judge is sitting up on his chair in an empty courtroom by himself, just tapping his fingers. We walk in the room. He says, come on, let's go in my chambers. I need to eat lunch. He had actually had one of his assistants call and order him a sandwich from down the street so he could sit there at his desk in his chambers and listen to what I had to say. And I laid the whole thing out for him. And I said, they kidnapped my kids and there was no reason. I had done nothing wrong. And I laid the whole story out for him. And I told him how I'd gone to the sheriff and filed the kidnapping thing and went to DHS, and they told me they didn't have them. They lied to me. Went back to the sheriff, filed the report. The judge looks over at the sheriff and he goes, well, is that true? Can you corroborate that? And the sheriff says, yep, that's exactly what happened. He looks over at the DHS office and says, do you have his children? And he says, yep. And then he looks at me and he goes, well, this is your court. What do you want to have happen here? I'm 26 years old. I don't know shit about what I'm teaching you now, right? I don't know anything, just what Roger told me to do, and he didn't tell me that part. So the only thing I could think of was, I want my kids back by 5 o'clock, and I want him fired. And I want him fired. And the judge just kind of looked at me for a minute. He said, I want you to have his children home at his house by 5 o'clock and your resignation on my desk. Just like that. And I thought to myself, does a judge have the power to fire a DHS worker? I guess he does, right? He just did it right in front of my face. I never thought that had happened, see? I felt so bad the next day, I got a hold of the DHS agent. And I said, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you lose your job. He says, kid, you did me a favor. I have been tired of stealing children this long. I've been there 22 years, and I'm ready to retire. You just set the date. And by 5 o'clock, I had my kids back. 3 days they were gone out of my life, and it was the worst 3 days of my life. And I'm sure for them too. In fact, I think it messed a couple of them up. Okay? But that's the story of how I got my kids back. And I told myself that day, no matter how much I had to work to earn a living, no matter what I was doing, I was still going to spend as much time as I could helping people. That's what good people do. And I just keep finding better and better ways and just keep trying to improve my classes and give you more information so you all can help me do it. No one person, or even 2 or 3 or 10 or 100, could do this by themselves. We need lots and lots of people all across this country standing up for this. We have to stand up for our rights. Do you guys know what your rights even are? You have many of them. They're all given to you by God in the Bible. You know what your rights are in reality? First is free agency, the right of self-determination. You determine who you are, what you want to believe, how you want to believe it. Nobody can take that away from you. When we go to war and we fight for this country, we fight for that right. For you to have any religion you want, believe any way you want. I don't even care if you disagree with me. It doesn't matter. I'll fight for you to do that, to have that right. It's that important. Free agency is the most important thing we have. Okay? If you want to burn the flag, burn the flag. I'm not going to like it, but you have the right to do it. Okay?
It's not the correct one anyway.
Thank you, sweetheart. It's the war flag. When you fly the war flag on your vehicle, you fly it in front of your house, you're designated your house as a military installation. And the government can show up anytime and come in your home. You fly the peace flag like I do at my house, like she does at her house, they can't come in your home. Okay? Think about that. We're all out there being patriots, and we're all standing up there, and everybody's flying that war flag. They have no idea what they're doing. Most patriots, as good as people as they are, as much as they love this country, as much as they fought for this country, and a lot of them died for this country, they don't know what they're patriotic to. The Pledge of Allegiance, I look at these guys refusing to put their hand on their heart and pledge allegiance. Do you know who wrote the Pledge of Allegiance? Or should I say, who was hired to write the Pledge of Allegiance? Bellamy. Bellamy was a communist, hired by the government through Edward Mandell House's plan, same plan. Bellamy was pre-Edward Mandell House, but it was basically the same plan. It's a system of pledging, to pledge your allegiance to something. The only thing you should pledge your allegiance to is your God and your family. Okay? Not a government.
If we put the flag upside down in the window, a lot of CPS parents under siege have suggested posting the flag in the front window upside down. Is that a violation?
Is it a violation? No, it's called a distress flag. You're in distress. Come in my house and help me. I'm in distress. Come take me away. Come put me in a FEMA camp. Come do whatever, because I'm in distress. I can't take care of myself. See, what I'm trying to teach you all is to be sui juris, to be of one's own rights, to take dominion, to stand upon your own 2 feet and say, I'm not in distress. I'm at peace. Leave me alone. That's what I'm trying to teach. What that means is you're in distress. That's just doing exactly the opposite.
It was really controversial. A lot of people said that's going to cause you even more problems.
And they're right. Those people are awoke. They're right. See, we don't realize these wonderful patriotic groups. I love them with all my heart and soul because they're standing. But they don't know what they're standing to, or for, or why, or how. And it's sad. Okay?
What about putting Z tags on your door, like the black and the under your house? Would that work?
Regulation Z. Everything is banking. Why not?
Yeah.
What is regulation?
Stick it on the trunk of your car.
I already have them. But this one, they're already on.
Regulation Z is under banking law where they owe us a republic form of government. Right? Any Regulation Z law is them owing us a Republican form of government. You're supposed to be able to go down here to DMV and buy Regulation Z plates. You go down here to DMV, I guarantee they don't even know what the hell that means. But you're supposed to be able to. They owe it to us. Okay? Your rights are original, they're permanent, they're unalienable. They're given to us by God. They're not given to us by anybody else. As long as you are not injuring another person, another party, you have the right to do any darn thing you want. Okay? You have the right to life, freedom, health, and the pursuit of happiness, the right to contract or not to contract, which is an unlimited right. Okay? You have the right to earn a living by being compensated with wages, a salary, or any trade goods in fair exchange for one's work. There's a maximal law. A man is worthy of his hire. Okay? You pay him what he's worth. Be fair in your dealings with your fellow man, your neighbors. That's all that means. You have the right to travel in the ordinary course of one's life and business. You have the right to privacy and confidentiality, free from unwarranted invasion. Oh my God. They're putting cameras on every stoplight. They're listening to every word on your phone. They're watching you through your television set, through the cameras on your TV.
And your laptop.
Through your laptops, through your desktop computers, through your phone.
Mr. Straight, is Alexa hard linked to the satellites?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, please go throw that Alexa as,
I don't have one, but I
yeah,
watch iRobot for that reference.
all of them. Every brand of that type of deal is listening to every word you say. There is no privacy. There's no doctor-patient confidentiality thanks to Obamacare. Nothing you say to a psychiatrist, to a doctor, to anything is safe. Everything is coded. It's held on 3 supercomputers at the University of Texas in Austin. Any pedophile trafficker can access those computers. They set up businesses just to do that, just to track you and your medical. They can track a woman who goes to her gynecologist and thinks she's pregnant. She gets tested, she's pregnant. They follow that baby. They'll know if it's got green eyes and blue hair. I mean, they'll know everything. Okay? And then they could target you. And don't think they don't target you. They target people all the time. I proved that. I proved that to the Department of Justice. Look, who is the most powerful man in our world right now? Huh? No? I'm gonna blow your mind for just a minute. Who is the most powerful man in the world right now? No. Peter Thiel. T-H-E-I-L. Peter Thiel. You know why he is the most powerful man in the world right now? He has all the data of everything. Everything you buy, all your finances, everything you say, everything. He has all the data in the world.
Is that the NSA guy?
Worse than that. They developed a whole new agency. Look in St. Louis, Missouri, and Virginia. Okay? They have it all. Peter Thiel knows everything about everybody worldwide. He's all got it on data. His search engines can pull up anything on anybody. He knows you're sitting right here in this room right now. He's got your GPS coordinates. He's watching you. He's watching you through facial recognition software. He's the reason people are wearing masks. It's to train the AI on their facial recognition software to recognize just your eyes right now. They already knew how to recognize your whole face. Now they're learning how to just recognize your eyes. Well, let me tell you something. I'd rather be free and stand for the right principles and be targeted than to be a sheep and be led to the slaughter. Okay?
Those who comply are the first to die.
The right to privacy and confidentiality, free from unwarranted invasion. The right to control and hold one's property lawfully without trespass. The right to self-defense when threatened with harm, loss, or deceit. Let me read that one again. The right to self-defense when threatened with harm, loss, or deceit. Isn't everything I've been talking about? They've committed fraud, they committed fraud, they committed fraud, they commit fraud. Police officer pulls in his car, he walks up to us, he starts talking to us, he's committed fraud.
Don't put that in his face.
I'm just telling you. Okay? And we have to know how to handle that. That's the hardest part, is handling things properly. I don't want you in jail. I don't want you hurt or injured. Avoiding the bear traps. But still standing strongly upon your 2 feet and not giving in even an inch. See, that's the problem. You give them an inch, they take 2. You give them 2, they take 4, and so on. And that's what's been happening for 150 years. Enough is enough. The right to due process of law with notice and opportunity to defend. I want to make it clear, I am not anti-government. I am all for government. President Trump is my president. I respect him more than any president I've ever served under, and I've guarded 2 of them. 2 presidents I've guarded. Don't make me say it. The right to due process of law with notice and the opportunity to defend. The right to be presumed innocent, suffering no detention or arrest, no search or seizure without reasonable cause, without the proper due process, without the correct warrant, when arrested, without being taken immediately in front of a magistrate. If you get cuffs put on you and you get thrown in the back of a car, you demand immediately to go in front of a magistrate directly. Don't pass go, don't collect $200, don't stop by the jail, don't stop by the police station first. Take me to a magistrate where you declare your innocence, and chances are good the sheriff will be taking you home and apologizing. Okay? Most of the time. As long as you're nice. Okay? The right to remain silent when accused, to avoid self-incrimination. That's the single biggest reason people get into trouble, is you can't shut the hell up when you need to shut the hell up. It's the single biggest thing. You'll say something that you think is innocent, that's not going to get you in trouble. You'll honestly believe it won't get you in trouble. And they'll twist it on you and get you in trouble because you opened your mouth and said something. Never answer any questions. Your very first words to a police officer is, I don't answer any questions. Am I being detained? Am I free to go? And then leave.
And how they've twisted it now is even if you have light conversation, even about fishing or anything, it gives them an opportunity to explore more into what you have. And even it's just light conversation about fishing.
It's consent.
You're being chummy with the cop.
If you open your door and step out on the threshold, close your door behind you, you've given them consent. You've attempted to make contact. If you let them in your house, you've given them consent. You talk to them through the door. Don't be rude, be nice. Hey officer, you having a good day? I hope you are. But right now you're trespassing upon private property. What are you here for? And you'll let him say what he's here for. Okay? And then say, I'm sorry, I don't answer any of those questions. This is your notice. You're operating under Title 18, Section 242, deprive me of my rights under the color law. Have a nice day. Go home.
You let him in to collect bodies?
Well, if he comes in forcefully, he's going to be leaving in a bag in my house. Once I've given him a proper warning. I'm not going to fire on an officer without warning. I'm going to do everything I can in my power to verbally and nicely tell him he has no right to speak to me. Well, as soon as he declares war and forces himself upon me, he's fair game. Okay? Do I want to kill somebody? No, absolutely not. It's the last thing on earth I want to do. I'd like him to go home to his kids, and I'm going to tell him that. You got the opportunity right now, officer. Turn around, get in your car, leave, go home to your family. But come in my house, deprive me of my rights, and you're going to leave in a body bag. I'm not going to tell him he's going to leave in a body bag. That's a threat. But that's exactly what I'm saying. And I think he'll get the point just from the tone of my voice and from how nice I'm being. Okay? I'm not telling you to go shoot cops. I love police officers. Many of them are my dear friends, and they're good people. And I'd love them to come over and have a cup of coffee and sit down and let me teach them what I know. Because once I teach them what I know, they won't be writing tickets for statute violations, I can tell you that. Okay? You know, Gina's son-in-law sat in her living room. I taught him quite a bit about it. He went back to the City of Logan Police Department, and after about a week of not writing any tickets, they took away his car and reassigned him to the jail because he refused to collect revenue. It only took me a couple of hours one evening over dinner at Gina's house. You know, they get that feeling. They have these feelings all the time, like, I'm just something, you know. And I think that's one of the reasons a lot of them are pissed off all the time. They know something's wrong. They know they're not something. But the city attorney or the county attorney, if they're in the sheriff's department, comes in and trains them how to be policy enforcement revenue collection agents. And they got quotas to fill. If they don't write a certain number of tickets a month, bring in a certain amount of dollars, it doesn't pay their salary. They got to cover their own salary and their own cost of their car and their uniform and all. That's how much they got to write every month. If they're not covering that, they don't have a job. But some of those guys are covering that 10 times more. So then what does the sheriff do? He looks at his annual budget. He goes, I think I got money in here to hire 3 more officers. And that's what he does the next year. So now more people are violated. And then more money is coming in. And then he looks at his next year's budget and he goes, wow, we can build a new jail. We can hire 3 more officers, get 3 more cars. And this is how they expand their authority and their deprivation on us all the time.
What would they be doing under Constitution? Do you have police officers?
Sure.
What would their duty?
Actually, our county sheriffs could probably pretty much, we wouldn't need city police officers. Yeah, our county sheriffs could pretty much handle all the cities in their county. Right. Right now, our counties can operate strictly off their investments. Do you know that? Do you know they really don't have, they could fire all the county workers except what's absolutely necessary. I thought this was funny. Remember back under Obama, where they couldn't come to a budget agreement, and so they sent home all the unnecessary federal workers? Well, if they're unnecessary, why do we have them in the first place? Give them a pink slip, send them home. There's always Barber College. They can go do something else. If they're not needed, how many 100,000 of them went home? More than 400,000 federal employees weren't needed, were non-essential. See, I'm sitting here watching the news and I'm going, holy Christ, 400,000 salaries and the cost of their office space and their computers and their black Suburbans and whatever it is they're driving. We don't need them? See, that's how I think. Everybody else is going, God, I hope we can get them back.
But you gotta understand that they're doing that through budget operations. So if they don't use it, they lose it, so they gotta burn up and spend more so that now, okay, this next year when I ask for more of a budget, there's a reason why I need more, but then I'm gonna keep on doing the same thing over and over and over again, and that's where all the blow is.
I have a gal that used to work for me named Julia Jones. And Julia, when she got out of high school, she went to work for the U.S. Forest Service. She went to work for me selling mortgages with one of my mortgage companies because when she was with the Forest Service, towards the end of each month, she was told to go drive around and burn fuel. Well, when you're just burning fuel, you're also wearing tires and brakes, and she'd have to go drive around the mountains and burn fuel so that they'd get the same allotment the next month of fuel. So if they had extra fuel, her job the last 3 days of the month or 4 days of the month was to go drive around and burn fuel. Part of the month, they had a ping pong tournament inside the Forest Service offices. These guys are getting paid $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year to play ping pong and go burn up fuel at the end of the month. And I'm going, holy crap. Why can't we just give them what they need when they need it? And when they don't need it, God, don't tell them to go burn fuel. Where's their common sense? See? She couldn't stand it after about a year and came to work for me in the mortgage business.
So do you think with like defund the police, do you think if they stop enforcing statutes and just enforce, rape, murder, the important things, protections,
Yeah.
could actually defund a lot of the police? But I think a lot of the incidents that they have, the problems they have start with a traffic violation or something simple, but I wonder what you think about that.
Well,
These big cities,
yeah. Are there idiots out there that drive too fast? Yes, there is. But when should it be handled? If they cause an accident, there should be a stiff penalty. That's when it should be handled. See, back in the Old West, when we were all wearing 6-shooters, right? Going through town, there was almost no crime. Very little crime. Because if you stole a horse, you got hung. See? If you robbed a bank, you got hung. If you shot somebody, you got hung. The penalty was so stiff, most people were good, honest people, and they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to take that risk. In China, I go over to China, and I meet with a group of engineers. They all make $80,000 to $120,000 a year equivalent. They live in $1 million apartments in town. They got $2,000 laptops. They get driving $70,000, $80,000 cars. They go to lunch for 2 hours every day in the middle of their day. 2 hours. They took a 2-hour lunch to break their day up. A lot of times they eat in about an hour, and then they play competition games with each other to spur competition. The other thing is the owners of every business sets aside a pretty good chunk of cash every month to take special people to lunch. It's a reward system. You do good, you get to go to lunch with the boss. He pays for everything. And then the boss, I watched $1,500 lunches with 6-8 people. Man, they love Remy Martin. They love really expensive sake, and they like good vodka. And they drink those at lunch, okay? But the first time I went to lunch with a group, here's something I learned. They drove up into their car And they parked in a parking spot right next to a sidewalk. And the sidewalk is about as wide as this building. And there's people walking, I mean, hundreds, thousands of people walking past this car just during the lunch. And they get out of the car. They always put me in the back seat like I'm being chauffeured. And they all get out of the car and they start walking towards the building. And I get out and I go, wait, hey, hold on a minute. Anybody going to roll up the windows, lock the doors? Your $2,000 laptops are sitting right here on the seats. They look at me like, why? I said, look at all those people. Aren't you afraid it's going to get stolen? Oh, they say, oh, no, 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 no. No Chinaman will reach his hand in that car. And I said, why not? They said, you see all those Chinamen walking in front? 25 of them, tackle him, beat him to death, hold him for the police. They don't dare. And if they steal something, or a finger, or something, or beat them to nearly to death, they don't tolerate this. They take care of their old people. They believe it's a sin for their old people to die in a hospital. They're supposed to die at home where they're comfortable with surrounded by their family. They take care of their children. They take care of their neighbors' children. They're good people. And they all want to be sovereign, and they know the government's communist, and they know they get paid well, and they know they fly down to private islands and go gambling, and they all drive black Audis so they know when they're coming and when they're not. If you got a black Audi, you're with the government. Nobody else will buy a black Audi because they want to know when the government's coming, okay? And they just avoid them like the plague. They don't talk to them. They think as long as they pay them well so they can go gambling, and so they can raise their family well, they'll leave them alone. And they do, for the most part. The Communist government of China, the military might of China, they don't really pay much attention to the people. They pay attention to other countries, what other countries are doing, and how to compete with other countries, and how that's what they mainly do. Unless somebody is standing up against them, then they'll destroy them, for sure. They don't want people standing against them. So when the people of China this last year said we were going to go join the sovereign government of Mongolia, now you got 1 million Chinese Communist government, military might, trying to destroy the 2 billion Chinese people. They're going to starve them to death. They're going to flood them out, cause weather, starve them to death. There won't be any food. They can't grow any gardens. Heck, their pigs and their cows swam for high ground. You know? China's underwater right now. It's ridiculous. And then even land that looks like it dried out. Did you see the mudslide yesterday? Oh man, hundreds and hundreds of homes. This mudslide must have been a half a mile across and 4 miles long, hundreds and hundreds of homes. And it looked like this in the center of it and around the homes. It looked just like this. And it's like all of a sudden the ground just liquefied and it just moved.
Could that be an opportunity for some of these people to get out?
To where? See, one thing about China's borders is it's pretty hard to leave. You got to apply a long time in advance to leave. I was in China at a dairy farm. I was selling hydroponic equipment, helping this engineering firm get started. And went to this guy who's considered a fairly wealthy dairy farmer, right? He owns lots of land, he owns lots of cows, he's rich in China. And he introduced me to his daughter, who's about to graduate from high school. He says, can you do me a favor? Now, understand, I'd met the guy about 1 hour before. I'm from a different foreign land. And he introduces me to his daughter. No. He wants her to go to school to one of the best colleges in California, right? And he says, can you do me a favor? And I said, what's that? He tells his daughter something that I can't understand. She goes in the house, she comes back out. She brings out this suitcase, sets it down. He opens it up. He says, "You think 500,000 American would be enough to get my daughter a house, get her set up at the school? Would you help her do that? I can't leave the country. I have to dairy farm. I can't take her to California." She got visa, applied for it 7 years ago. She had to apply for it 7 years in advance to come to an American school. And he wants to hand me a suitcase with $500,000 American dollars that he has to go to the airport with Chinese dollars and exchange it for American dollars at the exchange rate to save, thinking he can send that with her so she can go to California, buy a house and 4 years of college with $500,000. She ain't gonna get a house in LA and go to a college in LA for $500,000. He's asking a perfect stranger to do that for him. To hand me $500,000, go ahead of time. He knows I'm flying home next week. Buy her a house and get her set up in college so when she get there, that's how loving and trusting these people are. To me, being from America, $500,000 in a suitcase. I can't even imagine giving that to one of my best friends and trusting him to go buy me a house, put me in college, right? Much less a guy I met from another country an hour ago. I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. Okay, the right to equality in the eyes of the law and to equal representation. The right to trial by jury, being an impartial panel of one's peers. What did I tell you the legal definition of the word peers was? It's someone from your own neighborhood who knows you, who knows your situation in life. What if he knows that you can't hardly keep your lights on, you can't hardly keep your children fed, and you went to the store and you stole dinner for your kids because you had no money before your next paycheck? He knew you were an honest man, but that you had to do something to feed your family. I think the jury would be fairly lenient in that case, don't you? If they were a jury of your peers. But what does our court system want us to do? They want to find a jury from the next county who has no idea who you are, doesn't know your character, doesn't know anything about you. How can they judge a man if they don't know who you are? Okay?
You said that we had to ask for that in a specific way, not a trial by jury.
A trial by jury, not a jury trial.
Yes.
The courts will try and force you, if you want a jury, they'll force you to have a jury trial. A jury trial, the judge knows that he can override the jury. If he doesn't like the outcome. The right to appeal in law against conviction or sentence or both. The right to expose knowledge necessary to one's rights and freedoms. See, I'm exercising that right now. I have the right to expose knowledge necessary regarding one's rights and freedoms. The right to peaceful association, assembly, expression, and protest. The right to practice a religion and to have beliefs of one's choosing. The right to love and to consensually marriage with children as a family. The right to security from abuse, persecution, tyranny, and war. The right to refuse to kill under command by the reason of conscience. The right to live in peace and be left alone when you're law-abiding. You have the right to be left alone. To live in the pursuit of happiness, okay? That second, the last one hurt a little bit to read that, but a lot of times when you serve this country, you're forced to do something that you shouldn't do. And very few people recognize when they shouldn't. And I've watched orders be given to do something that was not approved to do. And I've watched people follow those orders. And it hurts when you see people you love, that you fight beside, follow an unjust order, rather than take that commanding officer up on trial. See, I spent 2 years in Washington, D.C. at JAG trying my commanding officer because he was trying to get us to do things that we weren't ordered to do.
This is why I keep saying war is stupid, because both countries are doing the exact same thing, defending their country and taking orders. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, we used to go to war for a reason,
Yeah, not anymore.
such as Hitler committing genocide. When people commit genocide, we should go to war. We should stop that at all costs. Right now, we should be taking out that 1 million Chinese government for the genocide on their people. Okay? And we should be sinking Bill Gates' yacht for the genocide he's committed in Africa and India. And now he's about to do it on us if we don't stop it. So tell me, is the government going to take out Bill Gates soon? I hope and pray they do. Because if they don't, somebody better stand up. Okay, the number one right we have, our foundational cornerstone right, is our right of self-determination. Never forget that. I want to talk about the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights for a minute. Yes, I know it's a United Nations document. Do you know it was written by a private person? It was taken to The Hague to try and create rights worldwide with every country. That's what his reasoning was. And it took 10 years to get it in front of The Hague to be presented before they adopted it. Then they gave every country that's a United Nations country, they gave them a 10-year period to sign on to it. That 10-year period was 1976. The United States refused to sign that until Russia signed it. Russia signed it in 1992. Russia signed the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights in 1992, and then they went home and they rewrote the Russian Constitution. And one of the first things they did is elected President Putin. And he is absolutely loved by his people. And they recognize through their constitution a man and a woman and a person and the choice at any given time to be what you're supposed to be in that jurisdiction. They recognize that. They recognize the right to a family and the right to your children. And since 1992, Russia has been a freer country than the United States of America. The propaganda you hear about it here is false. They come over here and they buy our aircraft manufacturing. Bend, Oregon is known for its small aircraft manufacturing. We had Cessna plants there, Lancer plants, King Air plants there, Epic Air manufacturing plants there. There's plants that make just specific aircraft equipment. There's another plant that makes an amphibious airplane. I can't even think of the name of it. There's all kinds of aircraft manufacturing in that area.
You mean like a bat plane? It goes underwater?
No,
Oh.
no, it's an amphibious. It lands on water, takes off on water. It can take off on land or water. So, anyway, hey, that was good. I saw the fear in your eyes. So anyway, They come over and they buy our aircraft manufacturing plants and invest in our aircraft manufacturing plants. They do all kinds of things when you go to Russia to show that they're freer than we are here. And what do we call them? Bunch of communists. Well, that's what they were prior to 1992. How long do we got to keep blaming them for that shit? I mean, seriously. Do you know, I honestly believe that within 2 months of President Trump taking office, we would have had a trade deal with Russia and he would have been good friends with Putin and it all would have been fine, except the Democrats stepped in and stopped it by blaming Russia for helping him win the election and blaming Russia for this and blaming Russia for that. I can honestly call bullshit on all that.
Is that why Mellie got arrested? Because that was the focus of her investigation into this?
I knew the second I watched that video that she was in trouble and she should be protected, not at home with her kids. That's going to be a tough fight.
It's another Julian Assange.
It is exactly, or Snowden, or, I mean.
My mentor taught me years ago. He self-taught himself with his own lengthy ordeal. He's super smart. He called himself Fair Willings online, Wade Nelson. He explained to me like this. I kept coming to him with these distraught parents whose kids just got taken and falsely accused. He said, if I commit a crime, a documented crime against my child, arrest me and charge me accordingly. But to just arbitrarily snatch a child on an unfounded, anonymous report by a possible vindictive ex-spouse or angry neighbor or whoever, and physically remove that child from me, and I don't know why, and I don't know who, and this is what he taught me he was teaching me how to help the parents on that phase of the.
Well, that's why I'm trying to tell you. They do it under the two doctrines of parens patriae and loco parentis. That's how they do it. They do it because we're citizens, persons, and residents. We don't know our status. They do it because the state could claim to be the parent under a false and fraudulent doctrine that we let them get away with because we don't know it's a false and fraudulent doctrine. Let me ask you, how many have ever heard the words, unless you listen to my videos, how many have ever heard the words parens patriae before today? You know? I mean, on your own without listening to my videos. Very few people. ASFA and Title IV, the two acts of Congress that even set up our Child Protective Services agencies in the United States, say in both acts, which clearly states the intent of Congress, right? If they say it so plainly, they cannot take a child from a parent without the parent's consent. Unless the parent, through proper due process of law, has been tried and found guilty of a felony. And then and only then, they must search for a relative to place a child with while that person is paying for their sin. When he's out, he's served his time. He paid his debt to society. He needs to get his kid back from that parent, from that relative. And only if a relative doesn't step up to the plate can they place it in a foster home, temporarily. If you go to jail for 5 years, on the 6th year, if your kid's still underage, you ought to get your kid back the day you walk out of prison.
And the first thing they did in every case we worked on was they found a reason to disqualify every single family member.
That's exactly what they try and do, 90% of the time. Not only what I'm seeing it's even worse. Let's just say you got two parents, husband and wife, right? I'm going to point at you, but I don't. Anyway, let's just say she's a drug dealer or a druggie. She's on meth, and he's the good dad. They'll take him away from the good dad, give it to her, even though she's the one that signed the birth certificate as an informant, giving up the child in the first place. Now let's switch roles. He's a wife beater. He yells at his kids. He screams at them. The neighbors see it. They call into DHS. DHS takes the kids from the family. They put her through hell for 18 to 24 months, terminate her parental rights, and give them back to him, the abusive parent. They take them away from the good parent first and give them back to the bad parent. I'm seeing that all over this country. You know why they do that?
Why?
Because then once you got away from the tough parent, the good parent, it's easy to take it away from him. You screw up one little bit, and I'm going to just rip them out of your hands, and it's going to be easy because we've got all this evidence that you were the bad parent, or vice versa. Doesn't matter.
Our moms are being told, you file a restraining order against him now or you will never see your children again.
10 years ago, what I was seeing is I was dealing almost strictly with women because the woman signed the birth certificate application as an informant. They were taking it away from the women and giving them to the heirs, the hierarchy, the estate of the father. And I was dealing all with women. Now I'm dealing with men just about as much as I'm dealing with women. It's whoever's the better of the two parents is the one I'm working with because that's the one they're taking them away from. The better of the two.
Divide and conquer.
And that's what I'm seeing now.
That happened to me, but it was during the divorce, and CPS wasn't involved. The judge made the decision for that.
Well, understand something, hon. On my trafficking flow chart, you know how many judges, guardian ad litems, and attorneys are on that list trafficking children? Enough to make you scream. I mean, they're trafficking children through our family courts. Let me ask you this. What gave a family court any authority? Oh, hold on. What gave a family court any authority?
The mother unknowingly.
No. Yeah. Okay. In a way, your consent, of course, gives them authority. But beside that, what gave them any perceived authority? The state Secretary of State licensed their business. It's a private business, a private for-profit business, licensed as a family court. Not even really part of the judicial system. They kind of are. They have to follow certain judicial guidelines, like a doctor has to follow the AMA's guidelines. But they're a private for-profit business owned by somebody, just like you would a McDonald's franchise. If you own a McDonald's franchise, you got to serve a burger a certain way with a certain wrapper, with a certain amount of lettuce and tomato and cheese on it. It's made from horse meat or whatever. I don't eat fast food. But what I'm saying is, the family court's doing the same thing. They're no different than McDonald's. None.
One of the Nazi CPS workers out there who was notorious and greatly feared outright bragged to one of the neighbors down the road that she got $4,000 for every child she successfully reared.
They get bonuses.
Bragged about it.
And they get bonuses if they get so many children. She might get $4,000 per child, and then she might get another $4,000 bonus if she got 10 in a month.
I had 2 people in town telling me she was a known cocaine addict seen at parties.
What should be happening is when they do that and you've got it on tape, somebody would be showing up their house at 2 a.m. Let's just take that problem out right now. See, I'm getting kind of fed up. I've been doing this a long time, and the longer I do it, the worse it seems to get. It's not like everything's getting better. I'm watching it get worse. Our nation's been going downhill. Now I'm starting to see some light and some hope, barely at the end here. I think it saved my life. I really do. Because you don't know how much I wanted to arm up, go hunting. Because there's so many of these cases on video. I've got an attorney out of the state of Florida on video bragging to her coworkers as she picks out children files false reports with CPS, becomes the attorney in the case, and sells the child for $40,000. After she's made them jump through 18 months of hoops and terminated her parental rights. And
This is important, what we discovered at Rachel's Tears, while there's a case plan in place to reunify, there's this mandatory secondary case plan in place to adopt out.
mhm.
And they don't tell you that, and that's in the best interest of the children, supposedly.
Okay, all of that is SMU. That's all policy written by whom? I want to know who it was written by. Because it's just like that, what we found on the FDA. They write 1,398 policies that become law, and that one person who wrote them didn't have any authority to write them in the first place. And people are going to jail over it. I've got 4 people in jail right now over that. Okay, one more question, and then
What's the code that you were referring to that says they do not have permission to take your child?
it's not a code, it is an act of Congress. It's the American Safe Family Act and Title IV D and E of the Social Security Act. Title IV D and E. These are the acts of Congress that set up the agency, and this is how they're supposed to get paid. Okay? Thank you guys very much for sitting in the heat for 3 solid days on steel chairs. I'm proud of you.
And you're putting together a Facebook group?
Thank you, because this is how I tell, is by how many people stay to the end, if I'm given the right information. So really appreciate you being here. I love you all very much.